Good afternoon. Welcome to the HMIS Privacy and Security Training. Just to start off, I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Jennifer Barrera. I am the HMIS Program Manager. And also joining us today to present is Maria Vargas. I'll let her introduce herself.
Hi, everyone. Maria Vargas, the HMIS Assistant Admin here at the Coalition.
Okay. As a reminder, we use the slides for most of our meetings and trainings. If you could, just to minimize background noise, if you could mute your computer while we're presenting. Of course, there's options to add in the chat for this meeting any questions you have, and certainly you can unmute yourself. If you could, just so that we know who's talking, because a lot of you are off camera, if you could just introduce yourself before you speak. If, for example, I would say, hi, this is Jennifer from Rich, and I have a question. Also, one other thing I didn't add to this slide is this presentation is being recorded. So your continued presence here is for us, your consent to be recorded for the training. We are, at the conclusion of this training, going to be uploading it to our learning management system for others to receive the training. All right, first off, we'll review the goals of the training. By the end, you'll have an overview of HMIS. We'll talk about participating agency requirements, privacy, client data, reports and research, and lastly, training and monitoring. All right, I'll let Maria do the HMIS overview.
Yes, so the Homelessness Management Information System, also known as HMIS, that is where we put all of our information into. It's a web-based database, and it's used by the homeless service providers in Rhode Island. And basically what it does is, again, we put all of information, all of end user information in there that has anything to do with the clients that we serve. And the reason that we do this is to better coordinate and better understand the needs of, the community that we're serving, which is the homeless population. What we were using before, what you are all familiar with, is Service Point, but we are moving from Service Point to Clarity. So the vendor was WellSky. We're moving to BitFocus. That's the new vendor, and it is down. I believe our go live date is October 14th. So it's coming up pretty soon, guys. So as of right now, and hopefully to continue in the future as well, the HMIS lead is the Rhode Island Coalition for the Homeless. So what we do is we manage the system. We also manage the user licenses, the training, the data analytics, technical assistance, and compliance for all participating agencies. The guidance of Rhode Island, the guidance of the Rhode Island HMIS is also provided by the RI-HMIS, which is the Rhode Island Housing, and its subcommittees are the HMIS Steering Committee and the CES and System Performance Measures, the SPM, also known as Advisory Committee. So I won't go over these in too much detail, but the HMIS Steering Committee meets monthly on the second Tuesday of each month, and the CES and SPM Advisory Committee also meets on the third Thursday of each month. And if you guys, want to either participate or have any questions regarding those committees, feel free to email the help desk, and we can definitely answer those questions for you.
Okay, thank you, Maria. The next part of our presentation is related to participating agency requirements. You'll see a lot of bright colors today in our presentation, and that's because we really worked hard to organize this training. If you've taken it before, you may have noticed that it has a lot of content, and so in order to organize it for all of you and for us presenting it, we have it color-coded. So participating agencies. All programs which receive these types of funding from the State Consolidated Homeless Fund, the COC, Runaway and Homeless Youth, or RI funding, Supportive Service for Veteran Families, or SSVF, and PATH funding are required by their funding to enter information into HMIS. There are exclusions for victim service providers who enter their data into a comparable database, which is even more secure than our HMIS. We do strongly encourage voluntary participation for programs and services benefiting our homeless and recently housed constituents so that we have a more robust data set. Partnership agreements is the first thing that occurs when an agency approaches HMIS to become a new part of the HMIS instance. So a partnership agreement is executed between the agency and the Coalition for the Homeless. In addition, if you are a HIPAA covered entity, you would also need to execute a business associate agreement, which basically is an agreement that details how information is being collected and shared and protected. Additionally, partner agencies are required to complete organization setup forms, project setup forms, and then they have a requirement at the start of their work within HMIS to complete a security audit checklist, which we're going to go over a little bit later. And they also will need to purchase end user licenses. So anyone who's going to actually have a login and be entering data or read-only or reporting, anyone who's going to have a login into HMIS will need to have a license purchased for them. And then lastly, all end users for the partnership agency, or the partnering agency rather, will need to complete training. All right. In addition, partner agencies need to identify an agency manager. So this doesn't necessarily need to be their executive director. It could just be whoever is the head user of HMIS, or the program manager, whomever is identified has an additional, has some additional responsibilities that we're going to outline here. So they're responsible to administer and monitor staff access. They are responsible to ensure compliance with all HMIS policies and procedures through training and staff oversight, and also they have to interact with others in their agency to ensure that the policies of their agency support and enforce the HMIS policies. They have to prevent staff misuse of the HMIS data system. They're responsible to restrict access to HMIS to only those users who've received proper training, and they have to follow any procedure changes that are determined by the HMIS steering committee that we just talked about, that Maria just talked about. And then lastly, they are responsible for administering agency-specified data protection controls, which we'll talk a little bit later when we talk about your workstation and how to keep your workstation that you're using HMIS on secure. Additional requirements. I said they had some additional requirements, and they do. Let's see. I think they're responsible for implementing and maintaining data security policies and standards in accordance with HIPAA, or sorry, not HIPAA, the HMIS PPI policy and the release of information. We're going to talk about that later. They're also responsible for aiding in and or coordinating for recovery of data when necessary, detecting and responding to any violations, generating data quality reports, which all of our agency managers are in the midst of doing right now. And lastly, they're the person who's responsible for identifying to the HMIS administrators if there's any changes within the agency profile related to the program type or the bed unit inventory, or if a user no longer needs access to HMIS. All right. Next up is Sorry. Oh my gosh, I'm sorry. I read from a different slide and didn't proceed this slide. I apologize. The slide deck will be emailed out to all of the attendees as well. Okay. Next up is security officers. So we're in the process of changing our policies to reflect what's actually happening in our community, and also to reflect all of the changes that are happening between our service point, which we're currently using, and Clarity, which is the system we're going to be moving to. So these slides sort of represent where we are right now, but we're intending actually for security officers to actually just simply be the agency manager. So all of these roles that you're hearing here and responsibilities will be added to the responsibility of the agency manager. So the system-wide security officer is, they're responsible for assessing security measures that are in place to establish access to HMIS for an agency. Oh, sorry, this is the system-wide security officer. So that's actually the HMIS lead, which is actually our HMIS system-wide security officer is Maria Vargas. So she's responsible for assessing security measures in place to establish access to HMIS for a new agency, reviewing and maintaining the participating agency's documentation and compliance checklists, for conducting annual audits to ensure that all of the security features we talk about later in this presentation are actually in place at every workstation and with all the organizations. So without further ado, we'll go to the next slide. So then each agency also has identified a security officer, and that is the role that we're actually intending to explore, just making the agency manager also concurrently the security officer. So the security officer position, that the person who is the agency manager and security officer should have the knowledge to ensure that each workstation security audit is conducted at the start of entry into HMIS, and then annually. They have to complete a certification checklist and submit it to the HMIS lead, and they should conduct regular monitoring to ensure that the HMIS data collection and entry is adequately protected by firewall, antivirus, and anti-malware software. There's some additional specifications in the technical safeguards in our workstation computer policy. We'll give folks who need that a link at the end of this, at the end of these slides. Okay, so next up are most of you, the HMIS, all of you actually, even agency managers are also HMIS end users. So there's a couple slides about what your responsibilities are. And so I know at the end of the day, I know this is not super exciting information, but when you sign your end user license agreement, which all of you have signed in order to be in Service Point, and you will be asked to sign it again when you first log in to the instance at Clarity, you are attesting that you will actually do all of these things that we're going to talk about here. So you should make sure to maybe just pay super close attention. And if there's something here you don't understand, you should talk to your agency manager or talk to one of us HMIS leads so we can help you to make sure you understand your responsibilities. So any new user can be added to a vacant license by submitting a new user form. Agencies can also purchase additional licenses. Participating agencies must have at least one staff member or volunteer who's eligible to become an HMIS user, and users can be paid staff or official volunteers. So there's a little side note here: official volunteers have to fill out a volunteer application and undergo agency training. And agencies need to record their volunteer hours in order to be considered an official volunteer. Individuals who are solely contracting with an agency are also, for the purpose of HMIS data, must be, are subject to the same vetting and training as staff and volunteers to become HMIS users. All users must be at least 18 years old and possess basic computer skills. All right, next up, your end user responsibilities. You should understand and abide by the privacy notice, and you must be able to explain it to clients. We're going to get into the privacy notice a little bit later on in the presentation. And again, we're going to give you these slides. So if there's areas like the privacy notice where you need to spend a little more time so that you are able to explain to clients, you'll have this information. You need to be able to present your agency's privacy statement to the client before you collect any information. You're responsible to uphold the client's privacy in HMIS. Know where to refer the client if you cannot answer the client's question. That word is sort of weird. You should have the privacy statement and data collection statement posted both in English and in Spanish at your workstation. And you must complete the Consumer's Informed Consent Sharing and Release of Information Authorization, otherwise known as the ROI, prior to collecting HMIS data. We'll talk more about the ROI and what to do if a client refuses it later on in the presentation. And lastly, I sort of said that twice. So you'll obtain the ROI before you use HMIS with a client. I'm sorry. I think I just stuttered in a slide. All right. So we are moving on to the second section. Before we do so, if anyone has any questions about participating agencies, agency managers, end users, or security officers, now is your chance. All right. So just a reminder, if you do have questions that pop up, go ahead and put it in the chat, and we'll stop in between each of the segments just to hear any questions you might have. You also, at that point, could unmute yourself and ask your question. All right. So next up is privacy. As you can see, because this is a privacy training, this is a pretty busy agenda for the next section. First up is the agency responsibilities for privacy. They're responsible to uphold the Rhode Island COC privacy plan. This is different this year than any other year. The HMIS previously had requested that agencies simply make sure that all of the privacy requirements from our statement are included in their own agency's privacy policy. And we're actually going to be proposing next week that the privacy policy stays intact and that your agencies adopt the privacy policy as part of, like as an addendum or as your privacy policy if you don't have one. So we're going to have the Rhode Island COC privacy plan that is going to be voted on next week, and it will be distributed after that. Agencies are responsible to review the 2004 HUD HMIS privacy standards, ensure that clients are aware of the privacy statement and have access to it. If you're an agency that has a website, you are required by the HMIS privacy standards to have it made available on your website. Also, you're responsible to make reasonable accommodations for persons with disabilities, language barriers, or educational barriers. Ensure that anyone working with clients that are covered by the privacy statement can meet the user responsibilities. We talked about that under end user responsibilities. If someone asks you what's in the privacy statement, you should be able to convey that. And then lastly, agencies have to designate a security officer, which we've already talked about. All right. Next up, privacy and the HUD Privacy Act. So the Privacy Act was actually written in 2004, and then there were some amendments to it in the HARF Act of 2009. But basically, to break it down, if you can imagine, it's a pretty lengthy and technical document, but to break it down, under the Privacy Act, clients have a right to see their records, correct their record, and we'll talk about that later on under client data in the client data section. It also mandates that we inform clients why the information is being collected and how it's going to be used, and that we ensure, sorry, that's offshore, I don't know where that typo came from, that the information is accurate, relevant, and complete before we disclose it to others, and that clients have the ability to find out about any disclosures of their records to other persons, and we provide clients who request it an opportunity to correct any inaccuracies in their record. Okay, next up, the HMIS agency privacy notice. Like I said, it's in the process of final approval of the revisions, but basically the Hud Privacy Notice is the main document. It outlines the minimum standards for which agencies collect, utilize, and disclose information. Agencies will be required to adopt our privacy notice either as their privacy statement or as an addendum to their existing privacy policies. And again, it has to be on your website. There should be a consumer notice that's posted at your workstation. I know we'll talk about this several times, but it is a real important part of HMIS data collection is consumer notice. And then lastly, the informed consent, sharing, and release of information. Sorry, I have a bar blocking my screen, which is the release of information. So we'll talk in depth about the release of information and what to do if it's refused. All right. User account management. Agencies are responsible to manage each end user's account, and this is how it addresses it. So HMIS, the HMIS system admin will create and delete any HMIS end users. All users will have a unique username. Access levels are determined. So everyone that works within the HMIS instance, whether they're agency managers, program managers, case managers, all of you have different access levels to HMIS. So it gives you access to different records, viewing different elements of a client's record, and also gives you different levels of access to reports and other key elements of HMIS data. Agency managers are required to notify the HMIS lead within 24 hours of an end user separation, or as we saw during COVID, a furlough, so that the user access is deactivated. And it has to be within, I think we're saying it twice, within 24 hours. And the participating agency manager must develop and implement procedures for managing new, retired, and compromised local system account credentials. Okay, this is the same slide. I did not actually duplicate it by mistake, but again, I put it in both sections under end user and privacy. As an end user, with every single person, myself included, who logs into HMIS, we all sign an end user license agreement. And again, you already have agreed to all of this. And when you log into Clarity, the live version of our new database, for the first time, you're going to be asked to sign it again. So when you sign it, you're actually attesting that you will abide by all of the responsibilities. So I put the slide here again, just as a reminder, and to stress how important your understanding of this end user license agreement is. You're attesting that you're going to uphold the client's privacy in HMIS, that you're going to know where to refer clients if you cannot answer their questions, that you're going to present the agency's privacy policy to them in the form of the policy and collection statements posted in your workstation. And then you are going to understand the privacy notice enough that if a client asks you additional questions, you're going to be able to tell them how we keep their information private and how and why we would share their information. And then, of course, you will collect a release of information with clients, hopefully, before you enter their information at HMIS. Clients do have a right to refuse, and we'll address that later on. All right, workstation. Put the definition of a workstation in here. But basically, workstations include any device that is used to access HMIS. And with our new instance of HMIS, we're going to be able to use our mobile phones. So that includes phones. So it could be laptops, tablets, desktops, phones, you name it. Anything you use that you can log in and view HMIS records, that's a workstation. Okay. Unauthorized access must be prevented. So your user ID and your passwords are only for yourself, should not be shared. And you please, we talk about it later on, please don't write it down and stick it onto your screen or put it under your keyboard. Someone can actually use it to access HMIS. And just so you know, the licenses do cost money, but we do have a mechanism to audit to see who's logging in at what IP address. So if there's an agency that is misusing the HMIS logins and sharing among employees, we are able to detect that, and that would represent a violation. And we'll talk about that also later on the slides. We have a lot to cover, but if there's violations, it could lead to people being unable to access HMIS, either on a temporary or permanent basis. Okay, so workstation security. So this is your desktop, laptop, mobile phone, tablet. This is your workstation. So if you are logging into it, you and your security officer need to make sure these things are present. So your security officer needs to confirm that any workstation shall have antivirus, anti-malware software with a current virus definition and frequent full system scans. They also need to confirm that any workstation accessing HMIS uses a hardware or software firewall, either on the workstation itself or if it's accessed through a modem or central server. I think I'm misreading this, but your security officer will need to make sure that however you're accessing the internet to access HMIS is secure through a firewall. Okay, next up for workstation security is restricting physical access. So you may have the correct login password secure. You may have your workstation have the correct antivirus and firewall and anti-malware, but you also need to make sure that only authorized personnel have access to your workstation. So that means you can't leave your desktop logged in and leave your office, and anyone from your agency who's any clients could just walk into your office. So you would have to have your workstation in a locked facility or a restricted area. If you have laptops, they do talk about some cable locks, but I'll read these bullets so that I'm not duplicating content here. So you must secure your workstation before you leave the area, so that would mean logging off. You should have a password protected screensaver with a short timeout period. So it's happened to all of us. You turn and have a conversation with a coworker, and once you get back to your screen, it's already timed out. That's actually a security feature, so that if you do walk away, it's a second way to prevent people who are unauthorized from accessing your computer. You need to comply with all applicable password policies and procedures. Make sure that your workstations are only used for authorized business purposes. I recognize that in the land of COVID, some people were working remote and were using their own personal computers. We did send out some notices around how to ensure HMIS data security on your personal equipment. So your agency manager should have shared that. And then lastly, never install unauthorized software on your workstation. So most agencies have policies around that you sign when you get hired. So I would imagine that that's not going to be an issue. Also, storing of all sensitive information, included PHI, must be on an encrypted network server. So you cannot store client data from HMIS or anywhere else on your desktop or anywhere else in your computer, your downloads folder, or in your browser history. You must only store it on your encrypted network server. If you have a laptop, you should be either locking it in a drawer or using a cable lock, even if it's in a locked office. You should ensure that workstations are updated regularly. and left on but logged off to ensure IT after-hour updates. And remember to exit running applications and close open documents. So you shouldn't leave documents open and other applications running at night when you leave for the night when you stop working. I was going to say when you leave, but if you're at home, you're just stopping working. Ensure that your workstation uses a surge protector, not just a power strip or a UPS. Uses a surge protector or UPS rather. And if a wireless network is used, you need to ensure access is secure. And we do have a wireless access policy. But if you can imagine, it would be wireless internet with a password protected access. All right, physical safeguards. So we've talked about this already, but your computer location has to be secure, and only authorized personnel should have access. Your printer, if you're going to print any HMIS documents that contain PII or PHI, you should make sure your printer is in a secure location. If you have a central printer or copier rather, there are some settings where you can set it to a lock feature so that you can print to your copy machine that may be located in a big hallway. And then once you get to the copy machine, you can punch in your code and print out your secure document. This is a big one. The next one is PC access, visual access. So you may have it in a locked office, you may have all of the security safeguards, but if your screen is visible from the outside, if you have a first floor window and someone could walk up to your window and see what's on your screen, that also is in violation of our privacy policy. So you would need to either move your office around so it's not visible by someone who's standing in your doorway or standing in a window, or you can also purchase a screen filter that attaches to your screen and makes it very challenging to see the screen unless you're really up close. A lot of hospitals have those privacy screens. Lastly, mobile devices. So this is important because we're sort of shifting into the land of mobile devices a little bit more, especially since Clarity is mobile friendly. The mobile device used to access and enter information must have a password or other user authentication, like a thumbprint, on the lock screen. It should be set to lock automatically after a set period of inactivity, and the agencies for whom you are entering information for should require that you have set up a remote wipe and or a remote disable option, so that that should be downloaded onto the device. Most agencies will request, if you're going to use a BYOD, bring your own device to work, they're going to require that you let them download that software. If you're using an agency distributed device, they should already have that sort of remote wipe application downloaded. All right, maintenance of on-site computer equipment. So even though the agency manager and security officer is responsible for a lot of the privacy, ultimately the executive director or designee of the agency is responsible for the maintenance and disposal of on-site computer equipment and data used for participation. So including computer equipment and the internet connection. So they can certainly designate their agency manager, but ultimately when the agency's executive director signs the partnership agreement, this is what they're agreeing to do. Passwords, I have many slides about passwords. I'm not going to go through all of them, but we all are about to engage in setting up new passwords in Clarity. So here are the requirements that Clarity has. They have to be 8 characters with 1 uppercase, 2 lowercase, 1 number, 1 non-alphanumeric character, and there cannot be any spaces. They do have some restrictions, so you cannot use the same password as the same password you used for the previous 3 passwords. You cannot use any of these in the password. RI-HMIS, Clarity, you cannot use your first name, last name, or your username. You cannot use these 3 ABC or 1, 2, 3. And you cannot use 2 consecutive characters in, more than 2 consecutive characters in a row. All right, so passwords are changed frequently. Your all user level password, so HMIS will prompt you to change your password, but you are responsible to make sure that your computer is configured, or that you personally make sure your email password, any applications that you're using, passwords to your smartphone, and actually your password onto your actual workstation are changed at least every 60 days. In Clarity, we have 2-step authentication, and there's 2 ways that you can get the code. So when you go to log in to Clarity on a new device, so the first time you log in to Clarity, it will be a new device. So you will need to do one of 2 things. You can request that a code be sent to you via email. You click the button, press send, go into your email, the email that your HMIS account was set up with, and your 6-digit code will be in your inbox, hopefully, and you'll take that 6-digit code, enter it in, and that's your second step factor authentication, which will allow you to log in. That code will allow you, if you check off that it's a trusted device, that code will allow you to log into that device for up to 30 days. You also can get a code using an 2-step authenticator app on your smartphone, and the instructions for that are actually in one of our trainings, one of our key beginner element trainings that are happening this week. So if you log in from a new device, you will require a new code. So if I were to log in using my desktop and got the code and it was good for 30 days, and then I switched to my laptop, it's a new device, so it would require a new code. Okay. Protection of passwords. I don't think that we have to go over every single one of these bullet points. Basically, don't write your password down. Don't share it with anyone. If anyone demands that you give it to them, please do not. Don't reveal your password on any requests that come in via your email or telephone or any other way someone would request your password. I think we all are a little more well-versed in password security these days, so I will leave the slide in the deck for you to refer to if you would like, but I think everyone knows how to keep their password safe. All right, next up is data storage. So only download and store data in an encrypted format, and you must use the industry standard access controls to secure the data. So it includes encrypted archive files like WinZip. You can use an operating system security such as data encryption. PPI data may not be uploaded and stored to public sites. I think I would hope that all of us would know not to do that. Unencrypted PPI may not be stored or transmitted in any fashion, including sending file attachments by email or downloading reports to a flash drive, to a desktop, or an agency shared drive. This one bullet right here is the most often the highest occurrence of violations for privacy policy in HMIS. If you obtain a client's consent to collect data and share data in HMIS, that is the client authorizing you to take the information they give you and entering it into HMIS, and then authorizing HMIS to share that data for the purpose of collaborating services and coordinated entry. It is not a release authorizing you to download client protected health information, including their name, date of birth, social security, or any other identifying information, and attaching it to an email and sending it anywhere else. As soon as you attach it to an email and send it out into the World Wide Web, it is not secure unless you use an encryption application. There are some agencies that have an encrypted network server, which means that staff member to staff member emails are encrypted. If you are someone who is potentially emailing any client protected health information, you should know what your agency's encryption capabilities are, and you must follow them all the time. Also, I think it's self-explanatory why you wouldn't download your PPI to a flash drive. There are some encrypted flash drives, but there would be very little reason for anyone to be downloading protected health information to a flash drive. It is very challenging to secure a flash drive. And then lastly, your desktop, not encrypted. So you simply move the document or whatever the file to your encrypted server, so it is protected and you're not in violation of HMIS policies. You should also be clearing out your downloads file and your recycling bin before you leave your workstation. So if you download a whole bunch of reports that contain PII, if they're in your downloads bin, even if you put them in your recycle bin, they're still there. So you need to make sure to clear out your downloads folder and to empty your recycle bin. All right, data retention and disposal. So, so data can be on paper, it can be on a computer, and so you have to have an agency policy surrounding disposal and retention of data. So disposal is shredding paper documents. So if you print out a client's record from HMIS, you wouldn't just throw that in the garbage. You would need to make sure to shred that document. Some agencies have shredding companies. Some have a good old-fashioned shredder under your desk that you have to feed the paper through manually. Either way, I think all of us, especially in the time of COVID, have really been able to work in a mostly paperless environment. So that's really what I encourage you to do is to really, unless it's required of your funding source or your agency policies, to conduct as much of your work electronically within the HMIS instance and not print out a lot of documents. Also, you're responsible to delete any information from any media and destroy the media before disposal. Triple formatting hard drives of any machine containing client identifying information before transfer of property and or before destruction of a hard drive. So you can't just say, oh, the hard drive's destroyed, that's enough. You have to actually destroy everything that's on the hard drive, any client information, before you destroy it. And then data retention. So PPI that's not in use after 7 years, after it was created or last changed, must be deleted under HMIS regulations. And most agencies have a record retention policy where the paper records are purged after 7 years and destroyed. And in our migration from Service Point to Clarity, we are only taking the last 7 years worth of data, but agencies must also take the same precautions if they have any local client records on their server. Okay, computers, I know this is so really tedious to go through. We're almost through it, and then Maria's going to start presenting on the next topic. So really quickly, all technology equipment used to access HMIS will no longer be used to access HMIS, will have to have their hard drive formatted. We talked about it a little bit prior. Formatted multiple times according to the DoD specifications. If the device is now non-functional after their hard drives are reformatted according to DoD specifications, then the hard drive must be pulled, destroyed, and disposed of. It is recommended that your agency keep records of your paper record disposal and your electronic equipment disposal as part of your agency record keeping. It would be good practice. For hard copies of PII or PPI rather, SPII, for paper records, shredding, burning, pulping, pulverizing the record so that it's essentially unreadable, indecipherable, or otherwise cannot be reconstructed. I think most of us just shred our records. And then lastly, mobile devices. So use software tools that will thoroughly delete or wipe all information on a device and return it to its original factory state before discarding or reusing. This is super important. We've not really had a lot of mobile capabilities like mobile phones until now. So this, you know, people often are upgrading their phones. So this means you. If you are using your phone to access HMIS, before you go to trade in your phone to get the next model, you have to ensure that you're doing this to your device, restoring it to its original factory state. All right, finally, you can stop listening to my voice, and now Maria.
I don't know I'm any better, but so we have about 20 minutes. I won't be reading off the slides completely, but I will pick up the pace. So if you guys, again, have questions, feel free to put it in the chat. Yeah, so let's do this. All right, so the client data. We're going to be going over client release of information, collecting data, sharing, use and disclosure of that data, client rights, client complaints, grievances, and client questions. If we can go to the next slide. Sorry, Jen. All right, so client release of information. Like Jen mentioned before, we're in a process of updating a lot of our policies and procedures, a lot of our documents. So this is one of them. So as it stands right now, prior to entering information into HMIS, end users are required to obtain a verbal or written consent of information. Moving into Clarity, that's no longer going to be the case. The clients are going to be signing that release of information right then and there, right in front of you guys. Obviously, with COVID and coordinated entry, that verbal consent, if it's verbal consent, if it's on the phone, you guys can go ahead and still enter in that release of information. So you don't have to have the client sign in front of you. If a client does not consent, the release of information, does not sign that release of information, the information is still entered into HMIS. However, that record will be made privately by the end user. And that's a switch that we're also making right now as it stands. If they don't want to be in HMIS, or if the record needs to be locked down, you guys reach out to us. We're going to be changing that. The responsibility now falls on the end user. So none of that information will be entered in or shared within HMIS. A big red flag: clients cannot be denied services for choosing not to participate in HMIS. So that still stands. Second part to this is participating agencies have to meet the following standards. So the release of information needs to be used for all clients going into the system. We're going to keep it the same where, parents, the parents' release of information signature covers minors. Everyone over the age of 18 needs their own release of information. And when the releases do expire, they expire in a year, you do need to have an updated release of information signed in the system. If participating agencies do not share their data with other agencies, the release of information is not required. However, the participating agency does need to provide Rhode Island's HMIS data privacy notice for all the clients that they're entering. Yeah, thank you. So the participating agency should note any limitations or restrictions that the client doesn't want to be shared within HMIS. And then the second one is the participating agency will be responsible for ensuring that consent is understood and given by someone who understands basically their rights and their privacy. So for example, oh, nope, it's fine. It's fine. Okay, so if a client withdraws or revokes consent for release of information, as it stands right now, if a client was to be in Service Point, And they gave their consent today, but tomorrow they revoke that consent. The information as of tomorrow is not shared, but as of today, it is shared. Once we move into clarity, if a client revokes their consent, everything in the system is now, it's not visible. So that's one main difference from Service Point going into clarity. And again, the updated release of information will make that distinction as well. The participating agency that received the client's information, it will be, so we no longer have to upload the releases of information because again, as Jen had mentioned before, the release of information will be signed electronically for the client. So we don't even have to worry about this one. If a release of information has been properly recorded in HMIS, the participating agency does not need to present the client with another form, ROI form. Collecting data, client information gathered with consent allows personal information to be shared when appropriate for the provision of services and or for other specific purposes of the organization and or when required by law. I just thought that was, yeah. So why do we collect data? I think we went over this already in earlier slides, but so again, it's to provide and coordinate services for the clients. Again, to better locate programs that are able to assist our clients, also for functions related to payment or reimbursement for others, for services provided, so mainly for our funders, to operate the agency, including administrative functions, such as legal audits, personnel oversight, and management functions. We also do this to comply with government reporting obligations. So I'm just going to put this in there, data quality, when it comes down to those reporting obligations. Okay. So, yep. Sharing of attachments. So we, as of right now, we upload client documents and attachments, and they're shared statewide as of the date that the client signed that release of information. If the client has not signed an attached consent form, you must only save the files within the program enrollment. Sharing of attachments will allow for better care coordination, supported coordinated entry, reduced duplication of collection of vital documents, and ensure safe digital keeping of important client record. That is going to be so much better in clarity. You guys are going to love it. I guarantee it. Don't come at me if you don't. So use and disclosure of information. Participating agencies are obligated to limit disclosures of personal identifying information to minimum necessary to accomplish the purpose of disclosure. So using the disclosures of PPI aren't described previously can only be made with the client's written consent. So anything not covered within our documents, you want to make sure that you get the client's written consent. Again, for anything that's not covered. Clients have the right to revoke their consent at any time by submitting that request in writing. So clients' right to request from HMIS. So they are able to get a copy of all their PII collected within the system. An amendment to any PPI used to make decisions about your care and services. So that request can be denied, but the clients do have the ability to, come back and say why. Also an account of all disclosures of PPI, restrictions on the type of information disclosed to outside partners, and a current copy of the privacy statement. So participating agencies may reserve the right to refuse client requests for records only if the information compiled in reasonable anticipation of litigation or comparable proceedings. So anything legal. The record includes information about other individuals, such as other than healthcare or homeless providers. the information obtained was under a promise of confidentiality, and the participating agency believes that the disclosure of the information would be reasonably likely to endanger the life or physical safety of any individual. Again, if the client's request is denied, the client should receive a written explanation of why it was denied, and they have the right to appeal that denial as well. So complaints, grievances, and questions on behalf of the client. A written complaint may be filed if a client believes that their rights have been violated. The complaint can be filed with the participating agency, and then it is forwarded over to the lead agency, which would be Rhode Island Coalition, if there is no resolution found. And then if the client believes that their shelter or services may be threatened due to the complaint, they can also be made directly with the HMIS lead. So continuing, the participating agency and the HMIS lead are prohibited from retaliating against clients for filing complaint. So just like we don't deny them for not signing that release of information or not wanting to be part of HMIS, we obviously don't deny them services if there's any complaints or grievances against the participating agencies, or even with the coalition. Identifying information will be kept confidential throughout the grievance process unless the client gives that specific information that for whatever information can be shared with whoever the complaint is against. Sorry.
Thank you, Maria.
Yeah.
All right, next up is data. So we're going to talk about data quality reports and research. So first up, data quality and monitoring plan. So the Rhode Island HMIS has created a data quality and monitoring plan. It was adopted in February, sorry, not true, in October of 2019. And we are in process through our migration into Clarity and revising that plan. But anyone who's responsible for the data quality, namely program managers, actually everyone's responsible for data quality, but people who are running reports should actually be reading the data quality plan to make sure that our data quality improves and is at the standards required. One more thing about data quality is that for many of our funding sources, it actually is a performance indicator, something that's measured and put into our competitive scores for when our agencies are applying for new funding sources or to renew funding sources. So it's not just that we're just here in this training saying, improve your data quality. Your data quality has a direct correlation to the financial awards that your agencies receive from these funding sources. Okay, reporting. Individual participating agencies shall only have access to full reports on their own specific programs, activities, and projects. Organizations can enter into data sharing and data use agreements with one another to allow other organizations to access agency or project reports and aggregate data. So this is actually one of the benefits of us moving into Clarity, because ServicePoint didn't really have a way to allow people to participate in coordinated entry without having their information available to multiple providers. So in Clarity, people's information is entered into their program, and only the users for that agency can view that record, other than folks who have access to the specific community queue, which is coordinated entry. Agencies can submit a request to the HMIS steering committee to have the HMIS lead pull a report that includes other participating agencies if it's for a specific purpose. Report requests are reviewed by the steering committee, by the HMIS lead, and can also be required to be reviewed by and approved by the steering committee. Oh, and that's what the next slide says. Requests submitted to the steering committee will be shared with the organization whose data is requested, and their input is sought before a final decision is made. Only aggregate and project level reporting. It's only for aggregate and project level reporting, and it's not to be confused with data sharing on a client level basis. So the data sharing on the client level basis is what happens within HMIS for collaboration of services. So if someone is running a permanent supportive housing project, they might want to see a client project history or to assess their length of homelessness for their chronic history. That would be an example of sharing client level data. Oops, sorry. I'm moving the wrong slides forward. I'm sorry. All right, next up is research requests. The HMIS Steering Committee will review and respond to requests for the use of HMIS data for research, with the chair of the steering committee having the final decision. No agency shall engage in any research external from their agency's review of their own client data, but there shall be no external research projects that are happening within our agencies using this HMIS data. That is a direct violation of our data and privacy agreement. Again, only de-identified aggregate data, if the HMIS Steering Committee agrees to provide data for research, only de-identified aggregate data is provided. Here's some more about research requests. Aggregate data will be available in the form of an aggregate report or raw data set. And again, in order for us to share any identified information that wouldn't be shared, sorry. Aggregate data, the parameters of the data, where it comes from and what it includes, must be requested from whoever's requesting the report, and it also must be presented. When you present the report findings or the research findings, you must also include the parameters of the data. Research results will also need to be reported to the HMIS Steering Committee prior to publication, and the Steering Committee must grant you approval to publish any research that uses HMIS data. Research will be shared with the appropriate agencies after publication. And lastly, the HMIS Steering Committee will be granted rights to utilize all findings from any research that is derived from the HMIS data. All right, now we'll switch back to Maria, her favorite topic, training.
Sure, it's my favorite topic. So we'll be covering trainings, violations, self-audits, and the COVID amendment. So training policy. Agencies will ensure that all users meet the mandatory training and onboarding programming requirements. Users who are not trained or don't have a current HMIS license in their name will not be given access to HMIS. I know that Jen was able to go over the new user process. So anybody who currently does not have an HMIS license but wants to be an end user or is required to be an end user, they should go back to that link when we send out the slides for that new user request form. So there are training policies. New users must successfully complete a series of training videos on the LMS, which is our learning management system. They must complete the homework in the training site. So it's literally a copy of what the live site looks like. And that's done at a self-paced time schedule for your own learning abilities. And we also have new user training that is done one whole day. We'll go over the COVID amendments at the very end. I believe that's where they are. But before COVID, it was a whole day at the Rhode Island Coalition, and it was 3 parts where it was the homelessness system in Rhode Island, coordinated entry, and HMIS training. So once the users are trained and licensed, they have to attend any 2 group HMIS trainings from the license time period, which is June 1st through May 31st. They must do 1 privacy and security training annually, which is you guys are done for this year because you're in it right now, and 1 ad hoc training presented by Rich related to the database updates, changes in software, or reporting. So group trainings, they are offered by the Rhode Island Coalition on a monthly basis and also on demand by any participating agencies that see the need for their own end users. Trainings are provided at no cost to our users and at the discretion of the HMIS lead or the RICOC. It may be determined that a user needs to be retrained or that access to HMIS shall be limited until sufficient training can be provided. And the reason we do that is because it's just not to affect that data quality. Again, back to what we had previously said, it's that data quality that we want to improve, especially for our funders, to make them see, you know, we're as good as the data that we put in to HMIS. So. Violations. It is a responsibility of each designated HMIS agency manager to contact end user to identify the HMIS lead within 24 hours. Oh yes, if they suspect a user or a participating agency has violated the HMIS operational agreement, policy, or procedure. So a complaint about a potential violation must include the user, the participating agency name, and a description of the violation. Also a time frame of when it happened. We have received complaints anonymously, and we have received complaints, you know, just whether it's through the help desk, through our emails, but just we do want to protect our clients' information. So that's very important that we do address those issues. HMIS users and participating agencies must abide by all HMIS policies and procedures, and they are found in our HMIS manuals. So the user agreement, the policies and procedure manuals, and the agency agreement. So these participating agencies or users can have access, user access may be suspended. Yep, I think Jen, you had gone over this a little bit before with the end user responsibilities. So other fees are paid by the participating agency will not be returned if a user's or participating agency's access is revoked from HMIS. I won't go down that list, but yeah, I mean, it's a serious deal, guys. So the annual security audits. So we conduct an annual security audit to ensure compliance with all of the policies and procedures, security requirements, both in person and on a remote basis. The audits are planned to be paired with other program monitoring activities. That way we do them side by side, and it's not so much of a hassle, you know, us going to the participating agency. So you'll guys be able to do those audits. It's once and done, that's it. So agencies are, oh, sorry. Nope, that's fine. So they are notified in advance when the on-site monitoring is scheduled. And we do have a monitoring checklist. So you guys are also aware of what it is that we're going to be checking. Remote monitoring involves agency managers providing the evidence of compliance, compliance electronically. So that's actually something that we're going through right now, and your agency managers would know more about that. Thanks, Jen. So the lead security officer will use the compliance certification checklist to conduct the security audits. And I do believe that we, last year, Jen and I went out to agencies and we checked some of your desktops. So like what Jen had said before, the workstation security and all that stuff, you guys saw us with our checklist. So that's what we were doing. So we also do randomly audit at least 10% of the workstations. And that's exactly what we were doing. If areas are identified that require action due to non-compliance with these standards, we do, follow up on those so that we make sure that they are resolved. And they identify those resolutions within the 15 days of us finding those issues within the workstations. Annual security audits continued. Any checklist that includes one or more findings of non-compliance will not be considered a complete action until everything has been resolved. Again, this is something that your agency admins know more about because they're our main point of contact when it comes down to these issues. So we do conduct an annually security audit. Sorry that says semi-annually. So again, we do go over down to your workstations, and the participating agency security officer also does audits for inappropriate remote access by end users. So I believe Jen had also gone over that we were able to see where people sign in if they are remotely. What is the IP address? That's what it was. So we are able to go ahead and see where everybody is signing in if it's not in their office. If areas are identified that require action due to non-compliance with these standards or any element of the Rhode Island HMIS policies and procedures, the agency security officer does note these on the checklist, and then we do work together to go ahead and resolve this. This is a little bit repetitive, I'm sorry. Yeah, I think we already went over this. If you just want to go to the next
Yeah,
slide.
basically both the self-audit and the audits conducted by HMIS, any findings need to be resolved within 15 days, and any findings that have one or more findings aren't completed till they're resolved. So yes, it is repetitive. I'm sorry.
Okay, so COVID amendments for our trainings. So like I had said before COVID, we had this set up. Now that everybody's kind of a little bit more remote, new users still have to complete the training videos on the LMS. The homework completed in the training site, that still has to happen. However, once they are done, you guys go back to your agency admins, and they are the ones that kind of either go over the issues in the homework, or they reach out to us and say, this HMIS user, they're good to go to be live on HMIS. So that's the only difference when it comes down to the homework part of this. You know, the HMIS will continue and has continued to provide help when it comes down to agencies that have new agency admins. So we know that you guys haven't kind of been, you know, in the routine of doing that. So you guys have reached out to us, and we've been able to work that very efficiently. So thank you for that. New user group trainings are held virtually for 2.5 hours. So instead of that whole day being at the Rhode Island Coalition, you guys are just doing like a 2.5 hour virtual training. And once users are trained and licensed, they are able to attend any of the 2 annual group trainings. Again, post-COVID, we've been doing everything virtually. And we still are holding that you guys to attend that one privacy and security training, and again, that ad hoc training as well. So that hasn't changed.
So the good news is all of the clarity training that everyone's going to be completing is going to actually meet all of the training requirements for this year.
The agency HMIS administrators or their designee can receive a credit for 1 group training for every 3 HMIS agency manager weekly meetings. This is something that's been addressed with them before. The security compliance training, oh, we have dates in this. So the security compliance training is actually this training. We've just upgraded it, so you guys are getting the best content except old dates. Sorry about that.
No, that's actually, the dates are just written into the amendments that we put in our policies and procedures. So this is just the actual policy and procedure that was amended for COVID.
Oh, I see.
Yep.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh, that's right. That's right. So again, your agency managers are aware of this. They are required to attend that weekly 1 hour long virtual meeting. And it does go towards their training requirements as well. Data security, when the HMIS team detects or receives report of a potential security, what happens next? So the first thing that could happen is the HMIS team will send out an email to the user involved in the alleged violation, along with their supervisor and their agency administrator. They could be the same person as well, documenting the violation, and the HMIS team will request all senders and recipients of that information to delete, whether it's an email, whether it was a text, or any of that, however it was shared containing that PPI. And within 24 hours, everyone that received that information has to confirm that it was deleted. So to prevent any future breaches of insecurity, our first violation, the way that we're going about this is the first violation, you'll receive a notification as indicated in steps 1 and 2 that we just did. And there's going to be a requirement to attend an additional security training, and the HMIS administrator will be required to create a written compliance plan with the HMIS user that did the violation and submit it to the HMIS team via email. With the second violation, that notification, again, as indicated in steps 1 and 2 in the previous slide, again, another additional requirement to attend a security training. The HMIS manager will be required to review the written compliance plan and document the review with the HMIS user, and review documents shall be submitted to the HMIS team. The third violation will be a deactivation and investigation with the HMIS steering committee. Deactivation can occur at the first and second violation. It does depend on the severity of the situation. The current HMIS policies and procedures related to security and privacy remain in place. So those links are actually at the very end of this presentation, and you'll be able to have that when these slides go out. But the HMIS team does reserve the right to take additional corrective action where appropriate to ensure the safety of clients, users, and the organizations. Speak of the devil.
Thanks, Maria. We made it. We made it through this very long and very technically challenging training. So thank you all for bearing with us. We do have a lot of this information on our website. We're in the process of updating our website as we're, again, transitioning to clarity, where everything has to be updated. So bear with us if you don't find something you're looking for. It should be updated within a couple of days. But also, if you need it and you can't find it on our website, and it's because we're in the middle of updating it, just reach out and we'll get you a copy through the help desk. We can send you an attached copy. And these are all links, so when you do get a copy of the slides, you will be able to link to, well, hopefully our updated website. And then lastly, here are the guides that HUD publishes. The data standards manual, project descriptor data elements manual, and then the federal partner programs manual. So if you are someone who is a program manager or agency manager, these should all be sort of links that you are regularly able to access. And then lastly, I just want to say thank you. I know this is long and all of this content is really mind-numbing. But honestly, you know, we do work so hard to provide our clients with the best quality services and programs, and really, you know, making sure to meet their needs for privacy is really at the most basic level of client service. So, you know, it's really important that all of us know our privacy requirements and understand them and are able to share that with the client. So please feel free to put in the chat any questions you have. We did have one question while we were presenting around the messaging system that's in Clarity. There is an email messaging system, all to be revealed in the next few trainings. So there is an easier way for people to communicate in an encrypted format that will be part of Clarity. Yet another reason why we're migrating over to Clarity. We have some comments saying, thank you, you're very, very welcome. We appreciate you joining us today. We have another training for your colleagues who didn't make it today on Thursday. And then we are recording this training today so that we'll be able to upload it to the LMS so that people who need this training can go and watch it and take quizzes and get credit for the training as well. So I hope you all have a great day, and hopefully we'll see you in the training in the next few days. Take care.